I would get labs back, or I would know something was going on with my body, but so many times be told, nothing's wrong.
The thing about it is conventional reference ranges are based on a really unhealthy, sick country, right? So the reference ranges are normal, right? We narrow those. So you need to either have access to optimal reference ranges or work with an integrative provider who knows to look for more narrow reference ranges.
Welcome to the Feminine Alchemy Podcast, where we explore the truth about the feminine, the peaceful, the wild, and the visceral. I'm your host, J.N. Behringer, joined by my co-hosts, Julie Dean Richards and Kaylee Rose. Each week, we explore the deep mysteries of the feminine and help listeners apply them to their daily lives in a practical way. Join us to unlock the hidden wisdoms your soul has been waiting for. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Feminine Alchemy. I'm your host, Jayanne, and even though I was not present for this recording, Julie Dean Richards did an absolute bang-up job talking to Kale Blossom. Kale Blossom is such a powerhouse in the functional medicine and functional health community, and so I'm really, really looking forward to you guys listening to the episode.
Rachel and Carly are doctors, and they are amazing. They're going to talk to us about women's health issues, and I'm just going to let them introduce themselves. Carly, why don't you go first?
Sure. I'm Carly. I am a chiropractor by trade, have practiced in the functional medicine space for about 15 years. I am a wife. I have 2 children, a dog, and live on acreage across the street from this one here, luckily. So take it away.
And I am Rachel. I'm a naturopathic physician, and I have had my own private practice for about 15 years, obviously in the functional medicine space. Kind of get my hands in a little bit of everything. I've written a children's book. I do women's support therapy groups weekly. We opened an integrative birth center in Atlanta, and we started Kale Blossom because our biggest goal is to provide solid resources for women, especially holistic women's health resources. And we can't see everyone in our practice, unfortunately. We would love to, but we were like, we need a safe space where women can come if they're not able to see us one-on-one as a patient, and we can share the same things we would do to support a woman if she were to be a patient in our practice. So I also have a dude. I'm married. My husband, neither of our husbands are in medicine, so we don't talk shop at home. I have 6 kiddos, including 1-year-old twins. And yep, I live across the street from Carly. It's great. We live on acreage, and I guess if there was a term you had to give us, crunchy, it works. We know you have the term crunchy too. So thanks for having us. We're excited to be here.
Thank you so much. I love hearing that. I didn't know you lived right across the street from each other, so that's amazing. And I would love to know a little bit about, why did you choose the name Kale Blossom? Was that just because kale is a superfood, or is there something else to that?
It took us a long time to figure out a name. We, as you can imagine, went through so many things. But if you've ever looked at a beautiful kale plant, you just kind of see it's green, leafy, nothing too special. But if you nourish that plant, if you give it love and sunlight and food and air, it grows, and eventually it will blossom into something beautiful and flower. And it's a bit unexpected. And I think that really speaks to women's health as well, right? You nourish yourself and you give yourself and others the love that they need, they will blossom into something beautiful. So that's kind of what we came up with. Would you add anything to that?
No, that was beautiful. And like you touched on, it is a superfood.
Yes.
We now know, after naming it, funnily enough, that a lot of people don't actually like kale. So if we could go back and change the name, we might. But now it's definitely our trademark, and we've come to really love it. So yes, honoring women and their ability to blossom and bloom.
That's beautiful. I love that. And I think it makes you really unique. So I think it's a great trademark for a name, and just speaks to that idea of what you were saying, nutrition and helping women and helping people bloom, and looking at ourselves differently. So I'd love to jump in a little bit. I would love to hear a little bit about your stories about, why did you choose this path? It doesn't have to be long, but how did you guys find each other? Why did you choose to go into integrative health, and what inspired
Sure, I'll go first, I guess. I knew a long time ago, I'm not going to make this long, but I knew a long time ago, even in high school, middle school, there were a lot of things that didn't make sense to me about medicine. I couldn't tell you what they were, but I just knew and felt that, things are this way, but why are we not figuring out the why? So I always knew I wanted to do something in medicine, and it wasn't going to be kind of that mainstream. So I knew in high school already I wanted to go to chiropractic school. I had shadowed people doing that. So it kind of led me down that path. I had my own health issues, I think, in middle school, some migraines, some GI stuff. So again, kind of figuring things out, nothing super significant and severe, but when you put things together and finally figure out what it is and then follow your desires, it all kind of ends up coming together for you, which is exciting. Met this one, fast forward, it was our first day of medical school. So that is how we first met. I was the shy Northerner. I still am more shy than Rachel, but I was sitting in this big classroom all by myself. She walked in, bubbly Southerner, came and sat next to me. And I'm kind of sitting here like this, all nervous. And she was super sweet. And we've been very good friends ever since. So we graduated and I ended up moving down here after she convinced me.
And that was January, right? We started school in January.
In January, it was cold. I taught her how to drive in the snow, which is
us Southerners task. We do not know how to drive in the snow and ice. So thank you, Carly. And I remember walking in and seeing this beautiful blonde in this like bright blue cobalt cashmere sweater. I'm like,
it wasn't cashmere.
It was probably not because we were broke, right? But I'm like, I'm going to go sit next to her. And I didn't think she was going to talk to me. And so I was like, is she snobby? And then I realized she was just shy. So, but this one also, she got hit by a car in high school and she didn't even tell her mom. That's how strong she is. And I think that's one thing that I've always admired.
Not smart. I would not advise that of anyone, but maybe stubborn.
And she knew she would need chiropractic. So, it's like the story was written. So my story is a little bit different. My always cooked home cooked meals. We always sat down as a family. She had this beautiful herb garden with rocks around it in our backyard that I just remember her tending to and it was like, if I could go back and recreate that garden, and maybe I should try.
You should.
I'm done having kids finally. So there's always kind of been this more natural minded kind of constitution in my heart and soul because of my mom. But when I graduated undergrad in public health, I'd also always wanted to be a doctor. I said, you know what? I am not ready to go back to med school right now. I am burnt out. I want to go get some real world experience. So I actually went to work for a large hospital system in Atlanta. And that's what really opened my eyes to the problems within conventional medical system. We were going into companies, it was corporate health. So we were tasked, we had a team that would go in and measure blood pressure and cholesterol and do glucose finger sticks, basic education. And we would basically tell these people 30s, 40s, 50s, your blood pressure's high, get ready to go on medication. And that's when I started going, wait a minute, is that all we have here in this toolbox? And I also was in charge of the flu shot campaign, which I can't even believe that was, but I'm glad for the experience. And that really opened my eyes, just administering those to various places around Atlanta for a few years, lots of them. And it really, really opened my eyes. So fast forward, they say naturopathic medicine finds you. It kind of found me, and then the rest is history. So that's the story.
And I love hearing how you both came at it from different angles, and also just, Carly, to hear your story, right, from this traumatic place. And then we all have kind of an awakening, I think, at some point. And to hear with Rachel, like seeing it firsthand, right, and both of you coming together to bring something is really beautiful. I would really love to know, now that you guys have such a big integrated practice and you're seeing lots of women, first, I want to know, what are the most common things that you see in your practice for women? And also, what are things that you feel like get overlooked the most in, modern medical society about women's health? Like, what are the big issues that get misdiagnosed that come to you and you see?
I think those two questions can go hand in hand, and Rachel might have something a little different. I think one of the largest issues we see has to do with just burned out women, burned out moms, fatigue, being tired, and then often moving to your next question, being dismissed as you're a tired mom. This is just how things go. But I think that's probably one of the largest things we see. So that can also coincide with hormone issues, thyroid issues, gut issues, adrenal issues. So it's often compounded, right? And so tired women is kind of the standard. We're all supposed to be tired. We're all supposed to not feel great. And that's kind of what I think it has come to be. And that's not what it should be, right? We should be supported. We should be listened to, and we're often not.
Yeah, they call us the caboose doctors because we're kind of the last last providers that they will find because they haven't gotten any answers. So a lot of times women come in feeling dismissed, their labs come back normal per their doctor, and they're offered either an antidepressant or birth control, which we know does not get to the root cause of hormonal imbalance. So a lot of hormonal imbalance, a lot of thyroid dysfunction, a lot of GI issues. Absolutely. The mental emotional realm, which is so, we think, undernourished in our conventional medical system, because if you are struggling in that area, there is no amazing supplement, food, anything that is going to get you back positioned to a state of health optimization if your mental emotional health is struggling. So I think that's always going to be in my heart of hearts, the mental emotional realm, supporting women. And we take so much on, and society puts so much pressure on us. We have a dear friend, Dr. Megan Tubes, who's a psychologist. We love her. She did her whole thesis on, basically, she would articulate it a lot better, but you walk down the Target greeting card aisle on Mother's Day, and it's like, Mom, you're my everything. You're my world. You're number one. You're amazing. And we want to be all those things for our children. But then it's like, you want to have a career, but you can't have a career. You want to stay at home, but then you also need a break from your kids. Women are supposed to do it all.
Yeah, it's really difficult.
And we have no wiggle room for error. And it's like, it puts us in quite a conundrum.
And I would just add on to Rachel a little bit too. I think for me, one of the most frustrating things, she talked about lab work and getting lab work done and saying it looks great. If women had appropriate testing done, just some basic lab work, and it was actually addressed appropriately, so many of these issues would likely not come to be. So it's just frustrating also for us to see that and think, we can't predict the future for a lot of women, but if we just get back to the basics a bit and really hone in on what people are saying, along with, some testing, I think the world would be a lot better for women and everyone else.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, there are a lot of issues. I can't tell you how many times, before I knew a lot more, I would get labs back, or I would know something was going on with my body, but so many times be told, nothing's wrong. And more recently, finally was able to be with, there was a long stretch of time I didn't see any doctors. I don't know if you know this about me. I'm a free birther also. So I didn't have those kinds of, checkups all the time. And so I finally went to an integrative physician just to get some labs and was told, like, you're not quite there, but it looks like you could be hypothyroid, which is not surprising for someone who is in law school and has kids and all that kind of thing. But I love that you're addressing the dismissiveness that comes, because all she had to do was look at my labs, right, and actually look at them and tell me, when other people had that opportunity to look at my labs and had said, nothing is wrong. Oh, it's within normal range, right? It's normal range, whatever, no big deal. And so I would love to kind of go in for women who are feeling like, something is not right in my body. I shouldn't feel tired all the time. Let's take because I think two of the really big issues are hypothyroidism and hyperthyroidism. I don't know if you would say, but how would you address those two common issues? What are some things that women could do if they're not feeling right in their body?
Well, I love that you finally had someone to do lab work. We always suggest, we'd love to hear her story. We ask in-depth questions going all the way back to when her mom was pregnant with her, because we know we come into the world with certain baggage, if you will, that will affect things like her thyroid down the road. So we want to know if you weren't listened to as a child, or if you're in a marriage that you don't feel like you have a voice, because that affects your thyroid, which sits right here by your voice box. That's a little bit more esoteric, but that absolutely, we've seen that connection so oftentimes. But the lab work, the thing about it is conventional reference ranges are based on a really unhealthy, sick country, right? So the reference ranges are normal, right? We narrow those. So you need to either have access to optimal reference ranges or work with an integrative provider who knows to look for more narrow reference ranges. Because just like you said, even the diagnostic lab criteria to diagnose someone with hypothyroidism, it's too high. So we're missing all these women with hypothyroidism because we have to wait until her TSH gets over 4. We like to see TSH less than 1.85. That's a huge difference. And the problem with thyroid dysfunction and thyroid health in this country is that the studies, it was a large, several thousand women study from nurses, and most of them had undiagnosed hypothyroidism. So it skewed the reference ranges. So I think there are some people that are trying to say we need to change those thyroid reference ranges, but that's where we love integrative medicine, because even if we see a TSH that's at 2, we're going to get in and say, this is a problem. Like, and we don't say it like that. We say, you know, your thyroid needs some love. Let's get in and start offering the cofactors, tyrosine and iodine and vitamin A. Let's work on your gut. Let's work on your mental emotional. How can we use your voice more? All of those things to start supporting the thyroid rather than waiting 10 years down the road when she's full-blown hypothyroid or Hashimoto's or hyper. And it's a lot harder to turn the car around, if you will.
And for people who don't know, could you explain the difference between being hypothyroid and what that might look like, and being hyperthyroid and what that might look like?
Sure. Hypo is probably the more common positioning that we see women, especially you think you're a working mom and school mom. Hypo, think everything is just slowed down, sluggish digestion, sluggish weight balance. So you're thinking like gaining weight. The whole system is just kind of dragging, tired, but poor sleep, thinning hair, thin skin, dry skin. That's your hypothyroid type picture. The thing is, which is an autoimmune thyroid condition, you can actually go from hypo to hyper. Hyper is when your thyroid is too activated, and then you're kind of losing weight, you're on edge, you're anxious. Thyroidism in and of itself cannot be a standalone. It's called Graves' disease. And then you have Hashimoto's, which can be both. And then you have hypothyroidism. So there's kind of a lot of gray with thyroid health. And that's another thing. If we just automatically box her in and give her a diagnosis, oh, you're hypothyroid, and send her on her way, it's like, how can we empower her and say, you know what, this is actually how your thyroid is working. This is what it's looking like on your labs. You've got some antibodies. We know that your immune system is kind of bullying your thyroid. I think explaining the whole picture. And that's one of the big problems with thyroid testing. A lot of docs will only do TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, or TSH and T4, which is one of the thyroid hormones. And it's literally like looking at the thyroid with one eye open. You've got to look at free T. You've got to look at thyroid antibodies. We've had a number of patients that come in with lab work from other providers that only have one of those and it looks fine. And then we do the full thyroid workup and we're like, you are blatantly Hashimoto's. Obviously, we don't say it like that, but it gives a whole new perspective to her picture.
The other issue then, you know, if you are in standard care and you are treated for a thyroid disorder, you receive medication, but then again, there is no deeper dive into factors that are driving that thyroid dysfunction. Again, whether that be diet, lifestyle, a stealth infection, things of that nature. So most women still are going to struggle to some extent, even if they are medicated, because those underlying factors are still there. So it's just burning, and it can get worse too.
That's a great point, because most women are automatically, conventional medical system wise, they're put on Synthroid, which is T4. And if they can't convert to T3, that medication may make their labs look better, but they're going to still feel real crummy. It's not going to actually help the picture. In addition, Synthroid, most of the thyroid medications have gluten, and most people with thyroid dysfunction are gluten intolerant or at least gluten sensitive, sometimes celiac. So we're putting a medication in that has an offending filler in it. And then you take it one step further. And when we get in with just medication, we say, okay, body, I'm going to do the work. Here's the med. You don't have to keep working. And then the thyroid kind of goes dormant. Whereas if we go in and we touch on those root cause factors, we actually can pump and cheerlead the thyroid back up and say, hey, girl, get working. You can do this. Because we don't want a woman in her 30s to go on medication. Medication can be needed. Absolutely. It can be a great bridge. But we don't want to tell her thyroid in her 30s, oh, you don't need to work anymore. We've got medication coming in replacing your function. We love compounded thyroid medication in terms of, because it's clean, it's T3, T4. You can start really low dosing. You can tailor the dosage to the woman. So we're not saying that we don't use thyroid replacement, but we love compounded. And that's always in conjunction with lifestyle modification, touching on gut health, leaky gut, food sensitivities, including gluten, the mental, emotional. Are you lathering yourself with lotions, potions, perfumes? Because this neck skin is so thin, the thyroid takes a beating with toxins for sure. So yeah, we're kind of passionate about the thyroid. She's really important.
And it is something that most women, we're seeing a lot of thyroid dysfunction in women. So that is definitely a top thing we see in practice.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I was wondering, because I have heard before that blue light can also affect your thyroid because that skin is so thin. I don't know if you have seen any evidence of that in your practice. What would you say?
The problem is blue light is everywhere. So we can't parse someone out and say, oh, she's got thyroid dysfunction, but she's not exposed to any blue light. Whereas she's got thyroid dysfunction and she's around it all the time, right? I think you're absolutely onto something. It's a new bunny hole we're going down. Blue light, it really interferes with the hormone cascade, circadian rhythm, absolutely thyroid, a whole host of other things. So it's like, but where do we go, right? We can't live in a bubble. So how do we add back in the buffer, the support, and fill in all the kind of deficiencies and areas of imbalance in the background so that we can at least be positioned to take on blue light, because it's not going anywhere, at least right now.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I would love to touch on too, like I love talking about the thyroid because I think it is an issue for so many women. I also would really love to talk about some menstruation issues and issues that are particular to women, not just menstruating women. I think that women who are menopause or perimenopause get so overlooked and they are not well taken care of. People don't educate for them. So what would you say to the woman who is perimenopause or menopausal? Like, what are ways that she can help herself not have these issues like hot flashes or anger or things like that? Like, how do you continue to have good health even when you get past your menstruating years?
That's a great question. And I think first, it's never too early to start thinking about it. So even, obviously we're in our 20s, we're not thinking about perimenopause and menopause, but just it is so important to support your menstrual cycle through your lifetime and just to understand it fully, because it does not have to be, you hear the word menopause and light sirens, bells and whistles go off and it's automatically this terrible thing. And it does not have to be.
It shouldn't be.
Right. Lab work, in thinking about what you can do, peeling back the layers and starting with the basics. Again, nutrient depletions. Think about stress. Stress is a big, big, big one. I think the women that we see who are struggling the most in perimenopause and menopause, stress is a big factor. You're pulling the energy needed that's supposed to be for hormone production or to drive in that direction, but it's just going to your fight or flight response, right? Your body does not care about anything else that's going on other than survival. So stress is a big one when we're talking about menstruation in general. Again, nutrient depletions. What else?
Yeah, liver health is going to be huge. So especially with our wine culture, it's like, oh, needs a glass of wine. It's the evening. So that's certainly an issue. You can get in and support liver. The liver is regenerative. It's like a starfish. So, it could be anything from food-based, like onions, lemons, cilantro, garlic. The liver loves kale. The liver loves that. And it may be something like glutathione or liver herbs in more concentrated form. Absolutely. If you have period problems from the get-go, we also see teenagers who have just started menstruating and they're like these terrible cramps and they're just awful and they miss school or, it takes them out and they're taking a bunch of Midol and then their doc puts them on birth control and it's this vicious cycle. So then, decades later, when you go to perimenopause, menopause, when the menstrual cycle was never fully functioning well, it makes sense as to why you're going to have a little bit of an issue on your hands. I think society-wise, conventional medicine-wise, I'm not going to say we, because that's not us. They don't know how to handle perimenopause and menopause. And women are going into perimenopause earlier and earlier. We're seeing it in our 30s. And conventional medicine, they'll come into us and they'll say, oh, early ovarian failure, and write them off. I'm like, okay, well, guess what? We believe that actually her body can cycle again. She's still early. Let's try to make that happen. The body wants to be in a state of homeostasis and have a seamless menstrual cycle and should have a seamless transition into perimenopause and menopause. And the thing is, you want to cycle as long as possible because you're putting metabolic reserves in those coffers for when you go into your menopausal years. There is definitely a lot to it. Stress is huge. I couldn't agree more. When your body is shunting and making cortisol and norepinephrine and epinephrine, it's not going to be making estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, right? It's trying to get you to survive. It's not worried about you reproducing, right? I'm simplifying it. But that, especially in our go-go world and what we were talking about earlier, these societal pressures on women, we're like in a state of cortisol, either hijacking where we're just pumping it out or we're bottomed out in adrenal fatigue. And the body's like, waving the white flag, I'm done, including perimenopause and menopause, like, I'm done. So yes, period problems. We birth, you are a rock star, Julie, for free birthing. I would love to pick your brain about that more. We both had natural births. Also, 3 of mine were home births. 4 of mine were water births. My last one ended up being a C-section because of the twins. And I feel grateful for having had 4 natural births. I was devastated when I learned I had a C-section. And it was the most, I mean, I searched high and low and did a number of things to make it the most holistic, family-centered C-section possible, even doing like the vaginal swabbing afterwards, which all the docs were like, what is she doing? You know, all the crazy crunchy things. So birth will always be important to us at Kale Blossom. Absolutely empowering women there. And we also know, and we've talked about, we really want to start talking more about perimenopause and menopause, because it is a group of women that are literally being forgotten about, dismissed, forced to face it on their own, and they're struggling. Yeah.
Hey friends, it's Julie. I'm just popping in here real quick to tell you about a very special invitation we have for you. If you have been feeling deeply called to learn more about your feminine identity, or to see what feminine power really is, or you're just loving the podcast, then Kaylee and I would love to invite you to join our community, Feminine Alchemist. Inside, we host live monthly women's circles, challenges, and Wheel of the Year celebrations. They are seriously so much fun. We have monthly workshops where we bring in experts to teach on anything from menstruation to mythology. You'll also get access to our library of courses about astrology, intuition techniques, sacred embodiment, and cyclical living. And most importantly, you'll be able to connect with women who are like-hearted and walking the same path as you. So if this sounds exciting to you, join today by clicking the link in the show notes or going to femininealchemist.com. That's alchemist spelled M-Y-S-T. Okay, back to the episode.
And on the other end, you know, we talk about things you can do. There's certainly hormone tests you can do also, that you just have to pick and guess and kind of go in this direction. You can, you know, there are great tests out there. We personally like to use the Dutch test in our practice. It's saliva and urine to do a good check on hormones. So not that you have to be guessing, but we prefer that over blood work.
And we aren't the kind of docs that some practices, which to each their own, when you go into an integrative type setting, that you have to do all these labs, you spend thousands of dollars just to enter the gateway of the practice, right? We are not like that, but we do really value lab work. And we also love hormone panels. If every woman could do a hormone panel every year, because we're not always looking for problems, but we want to collect specific data on her that we can look at year after year. And conventional docs will say, we're not going to measure your hormones. They're changing all the time. Or you're still breastfeeding, or, you know, you're perimenopause. We don't need to do it. We say, no, we do need to do it, because it gives us an inner window into her biochemistry. And guess what? Yes, hormones are fluctuating all the time. But if your progesterone's in the tank, your estrogen's through the roof, and your testosterone is low, which is a common triple combo we see, we know we can get in and do things. Let's turn up progesterone. How do we do that? Things like sweet potato. The highest progesterone I've ever seen in practice was a woman that ate sweet potatoes every day. It was great. Awesome. You know, we may need to do compounded hormone therapy. We talked about the thyroid. We are not anti-medicine, but we want it to be clean and customizable to that woman. Compounded hormone therapy can be wonderful. It got a bad rap decades ago because docs were giving women horse estrogen. We are not horses. We don't need the amount of estrogen that horses had. So we really missed the mark. And then that's why you saw this whole push with women getting cancer, because we were driving a process that shouldn't have been driven so hard. Go to the opposite end of the spectrum. And Suzanne Summers actually has a great book, The Sexy Years, and she really had access to some of the brightest minds and integrative docs in hormone replacement therapy. And one of them, I can't remember her name, but was talking about too much of anything is bad. Like too much estrogen is bad. But guess what? On the other side of that, too little estrogen, like is what's happening in perimenopausal, menopausal women, too little progesterone can also drive those dysfunctional pathways, including cellular dysfunction and cancer. So somehow we got to buffer and bring women back to the middle. When we do hormone replacement, we're not trying to make her in her 20s again, right? Little drops to tell her body, hey, here's a little bit of what you need. Let me hold your hand for a little bit and see if we can get through this together, again, while pairing that with lifestyle support.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think it's such a valuable perspective. And I do suggest for a moment, because you kind of glazed over it, Rachel, a little bit, but I just want to honor you and let you know, like, it's okay that you had a C-section, right, with your twins, like that is a big deal. And just acknowledging, like, I'm sure there's some grief there, after having all those holistic births and being like, okay, I have to be in this foreign environment. But I think it's a great example that, even if you're in that situation as a woman and you do end up with the C-section, there are things that you can do. You are not ruined. You didn't ruin anything. It's not bad that you had to use these things. So I love that you are honest about your experience and everything. But I just wanted to honor like your feelings, and it's okay, that happened. And also, I think it's just a great example. You've been telling women like, yeah, we do use some of the conventional stuff too. And you're not a failure. If you use that stuff or you've used it, you're not a failure. It's amazing. We're using all the tools. I love hearing all the tools. I love hearing everything you have to give. I would love, since we touched on it so much, can we talk about stress a little bit more and easy ways that women can de-stress? Like, what are the biggest things in your practice that you've seen for women to be able to de-stress?
Deep breath, exhale.
Maybe this isn't always simple, but I think it's probably very impactful. I know for me, likely for Rachel too, is finding something for you. And that does not have to be 5 hours away from home. That can be 10 minutes of coloring on the couch. It can be a 5-minute walk around the yard, but finding something that truly fills your cup, you truly enjoy. I know as a mom, you get to a point sometimes where you don't even know what you like anymore. You don't really know what your hobbies are, and you kind of lose yourself a bit, and that the stress is compounding. And to find something to give yourself, fill your cup, get back to yourself, I think is extremely important. And it can be difficult, but I think that's probably one of the things that helps the most. What do you think?
Yeah. And I just want to go back, Julie, and thank you for honoring my C-section birth story. I did gloss over it. There was a lot of grief. And you're right. I don't want any woman to ever think that she is a failure if she has all C-sections. And I hope that comes across in Kale Blossom. But that kind of is a springboard for how I would answer this question. Those stressors add up. And it's those moments like an expectation that you had. Like for me, it was another home water birth. And then it was like, wait a minute, I have to do a C-section. So those stressors that come up that we just store in our cells, right? Being able to process, talk about, go through that. Apparently I need a little bit more work on my C-section, Julie, because it comes out like, but even like what you were saying, finding something that you love, finding something to fill your cup, which also means sitting in emotions, right? Where you go, 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 go. We have to sit in the grief sometimes. And there's not really a resource on how to do it. It feels uncomfortable. We have to lean into those feelings and be in them. But certainly all those creature comforts, starting with sleep, we have to get more sleep. That's another thing. We can offer you every potion, amazing, magic, homeopathic remedy under the sun. And if you're not sleeping, your stress is going to be through the roof. Absolutely. We have got to have that time to reset and kind of rejuvenate. So sleep, blood sugar is huge for stress. They go hand in hand. And interestingly enough, we're not big health tech gadget girls, if you will. We don't jump on. There's some cool ones that we really love, but the continuous glucose monitor that was originally just used for diabetics, we use a lot in our practice to look at, especially women, especially moms, their glucose levels, because we can see these very, very distinct patterns. Her blood glucose drops, and then she responds in a way that she maybe wouldn't, into this guilt cycle. And it happens when we're trying to get kids out of the door. The worst blood sugar levels are usually moms in the morning before school, right? She's running around. She may forget to eat. She's having coffee on an empty stomach. And then she finally has a second to herself when she gets everybody out the door. And then she's already forgotten to eat. And then she's moved on to laundry or what she needs to do for the day. And then she forgets to eat for another 3 hours. And then it's lunchtime and she's hangry and her blood sugar is in the tank. It's like, yeah, you're going to be that's a state of stress to your body. So glucose dysregulation is huge. Dealing with childhood trauma that often comes out when you become a mom yourself, just speaking of moms. And so then you get triggered by little things day in and day out that maybe even subconsciously you're aware of, but consciously you're not. I think I'm a big fan of mental health support, whether it's a support group, whether it's one-on-one therapy, whether it's a mom's group, whatever resonates with that woman. I think women being with other women or getting one-on-one mental, emotional nourishment is hugely important for stress.
Yeah. Having someone to talk to, someone you can relate to, even if it is a really good friend, I think send a text, a voice memo. I'm in SOS, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think just a sounding board is really important to whoever that may be. Community.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Community is so huge. Like it's such a big deal and it's really overlooked. I know that it's one of the top factors, if not the top factor for your lifespan, for how old you become is having community and purpose is so huge. So we shouldn't underestimate it and underestimate it when we talk about stress and stress for women. I would love to hear if you had any thoughts about daily things. We talked about toxins a lot. I think people get scared about toxins. There's toxins everywhere. There's toxins in all of our stuff, our makeup and everything. What are some easy ways that women can detox maybe daily? Like what are some things that are simple that could help women with their toxin intake?
So I think you touched on a good point. We're always going to have toxins around us. It is absolutely impossible to live 100% toxin free. So I think that's the first important thing because that can become a huge stressor as well. I think it's also important to remember that we do have built-in mechanisms within our bodies, our liver, for example, to rid of toxins. So everything that we do ingest, intake, put on our skin, yes, I mean, not all great, but our bodies do have a way to package that up and eliminate it. So just a reminder, we are physiologically made to handle toxins.
And if you're stressing about it so much, that can be more toxic than the toxin itself. So we always say that too, because you're right, you can't be 100% toxin free. But you were continuing, I interrupted.
Little things that you can do every day. I think not being in an overhaul mentality, choosing one little thing that you can do, whether that be changing to a glass water pitcher or container for your water, whether that be changing your deodorant, your laundry detergent, just choosing one thing to work on for that day, that week, that month, whatever feels good to you, whatever doesn't feel like a burden or something really difficult. It does not have to be expensive because every little change that you make adds up for you and your family. So it doesn't have to be an all or none. But whatever you can do for your household and for yourself.
And any of those foundational pillars of health that you do to position your body more optimally are going to help to up the ante in terms of your body's ability to detoxify. So again, sleep. That's when we really repair, we rejuvenate, we detoxify. Hydration, flush. Deep breathing, especially women, we tend to be chest breathers because we're always so worried about our belly sticking out, which we actually detoxify through our oxygenation, nourishing foods. If you can't find it organic, if you can't find the Clean 15, if it's not in season, then do what you can where you can. I know Carly and I, being outside of Atlanta, we go all over Hell's Half Acre trying to find groceries from like different stores and farmers markets. But it's effort we know we want to put in because we want to find affordable, good quality food. So much relies on the food that you're taking in. That doesn't mean if you're on a road trip, you have to eat fast food. But if you're doing largely well, we say the 80-20 or whatever you want it to be, if it's 70-30, 90-10, if you're doing well most of the time, your body's going to be that much more capable to handle toxins that come in on occasion. Moving your body, things like rebounding, getting your lymph flowing. Can't underestimate that. Getting outside, putting your bare feet on the earth, huge, just to reset kind of your ionic charge, which is, again, good for detoxification. And then control the controllables, like Carly was alluding to. If you can choose either to buy a plastic water bottle or glass, go with the glass. If you can choose organic, if the berries are there and they're on sale, maybe 30 cents more, it's worth it, those kinds of things. So control the controllables, but don't freak out about the rest.
Yeah, that's super important. I think we do get into a mentality of freaking out and then we just have like one more thing to put on our stress list. But it's so good to have some practical, actionable items that women can do to help them detox. And I would love to hear, okay, this is kind of like a fun question for me, but I would love to hear like each of your, like, what's your guilty pleasure and what is like something that you do each day that you love?
That's a good question.
Pleasure. Do you have something?
I know even yesterday, after lunch, I love a little dark chocolate after lunch, only after lunch. And so Carly was saying yesterday, I want a little chocolate. So I broke out my dark chocolate bar from my house. And it just takes a little bit. And that's all I need. It makes me really happy. I also really enjoy a really good martini with a lemon twist on occasion on a Friday night. Like, I love that.
French fries.
Nordstrom Cafe French fries.
I wish French fries were its own food group. I love French fries. Seriously. And what was your other question? Oh, was something we do every day
that makes us happy.
Two kind of different things. The time before bedtime with my kids makes me super happy. Like making sure that I have this like slot with each of my kids before bed. We talk, or they tend to unload, if you will. I'm sure we all have had that happen. And then just kind of something I like to do for myself every day. It's just some movement, and it looks different every day, but it could be rebounding. It could be a little time outside. It could be doing my little exercise app for 15 or 20 minutes, but just kind of having some time, the loud music playing. I love some good R&B or like hip hop music to exercise too. That like energy out, can't like anger. But those are mine.
So since you did too,
it's a tie. It's kind of like by myself with my kids. Or just kind of tie.
Oh, that's what I was going to say too. I think having the best of both and recognizing that I love time with my kids and I also love time with just me. So my twins are at this really cute age. And since they're my last babies and we had twins, they're almost 15 months. I'm just sitting and taking them in and observing. And it makes me so happy. It just fills my heart because I don't remember or I don't know that I did that with my first couple of kids because you're just in like, mommy mode. I'm older now and I kind of feel like with this chapter closing. So I'm really enjoying that. And then the other thing, I have a rescue dog. She is the best dog. We rescued her like 5 years ago. And I have a pond on my property and walking her almost daily. We do several laps. It makes me very happy and it makes her happy too. So that is a double win.
Oh, I love that. And I can totally see the R&B. Like when I see your posts, I always am like, okay, 90s flow, let's go. And I love your answers about your children and your dog and like all the wonderful things. I just think it's so important for us to all feel human, right? I like connect to each other and I want people to connect with you. And you did remind me, though, I was like, man, this wouldn't be like a podcast talking about women's health issues if we didn't talk about weight issues for women, just a little bit about it, which I hate to bring up because I feel like I personally have been doing an experiment where I will look at myself naked in the mirror and I will tell myself, I love my body just the way it is. And I've been working on that really hard. I'm trying to do it for 60 days and help. But I know so many women struggle with weight issues. And many times we have conditions on our bodies of, I will only love my body if it looks a certain way, or I only love my body if it does something for me, right? Or it functions properly. And I'm trying to let go of some of those conditions. But I do think so many women feel so stuck when it comes to weight. Do you guys have any thoughts on that or things that women can do?
Absolutely. And, so many of the things we've already talked about, and we'll kind of get to, thoughts, but influence weight, right? So the thyroid and hormones. And so it's important if you are struggling and having some difficulty, it's not anything you did or didn't do, but, checking in with the body and seeing how it's functioning as well. And again, that's often dismissed, right? You go to the doctor and you say, I'm really concerned about my weight. And what happens? You're dismissed, go exercise more, go eat less. And that's it. That's all you get. There's just so much more to it. It's not always cut and dry, obvious.
And I think over time in our clinic, we don't even weigh women anymore because we feel like it is not the focal point because like she was alluding to, there's so much behind weight. I love that you touched on how we feel about our bodies and whether we love our bodies or we hate our bodies. I love the little kind of exercise that we talk about often with our patients, think about too, is if you would not tell your daughter or your best friend what your internal narrative is saying about your body, don't say it to yourself either. Whether it's I love that you're looking at yourself naked and that feels very vulnerable. And imagine though that neuroplasticity, we can unwire and rewire our brain because we are sent these signals early on, especially as girls, as women. We're rewarded with food, punished with food. We celebrate with food. Relationships with food are very complicated, very complicated. If we had a mom or a grandmother that was always dieting or something like that, those are the little pieces that we feel like are more important to talk about than, would you please get on the scale? Let's see what your number is. If we can work on the mental emotional piece, weight is a buffer. It's a protective mechanism. And we see that oftentimes we work with women with trauma, co-manage with their therapist or support group. And we see the weight changes naturally just by kind of lightening her load metaphorically, but also that works physically. But certainly I think protein. We've always talked about it like it's a dude thing. And if you're going to eat protein, you're going to be a beefcake if you're a woman. Women are so protein deficient. And we're talking, 1 to 2 eggs for breakfast isn't going to do it. And it may actually lend towards weight gain because if you don't start and throughout your day get enough protein, it's a big factor. Gut health is huge for weight. Glucose regulation is huge for weight. Again, skipping meals or eating the toddler diet, we call it, where you just finish what's on your children's plate. You're never really sitting down, food hygiene, chewing slowly, kind of honoring the food that's nourishing your body, eating too fast in the car on the go. I mean, all of those things. Stress huge. Again, we're in that cortisol patterning. You're going to especially put on weight around the middle, especially around the booty butt, in areas that sometimes women love, sometimes they don't want to gain it there. So yeah.
Yeah. We do. And we do talk about weight in our practice. But again, it's more of a side effect almost of the other things that we're working on. We very much listen to someone's concern about it and honor that. But it's more a discussion of what else needs to take place for that to also kind of naturally fall into place, if you will.
Yeah, that's important. I think it's really such a huge issue. So many women are thinking about it, talking about it, and constantly being told over and over again, things about their body, like your body's not good enough, you're too thin, you're too fat, you're too big, you're too small. And I think it's beautiful to see and to talk about. I just don't think it's talked about enough that like a lot of this is because of the trauma. It is because of the thought patterns. It is because of the relationship, that we have. And we don't spend enough time wanting to nourish ourselves and love ourselves. Like we're very good at like hating our bodies into submission and trying to like hate our bodies to make them do things. And we're not as good as at like loving our bodies and doing things like exercising. Like I loved Carly's answer because it was like exercise because you want to, because it brings you joy, not because you're punishing yourself with exercise. I love hearing all your thoughts on that and just the way that you're advocating for women, how you help so many women all the time. With this, I just highly recommend their Instagram for people listening. It's at Kale.Blossom, I believe. And they have so much great advice. They always are giving, they do lives, and they have really practical posts for people. They're down to earth and they are amazing. And thank you so much for just giving so much of your time to us.
Thank you. We loved being with you. Thank you so much for inviting us on. Your work is amazing. Said yesterday, we were like, we just like her. We like you. Thank you for the advocacy that you're doing. We are expecting big things out of you, and we know it's going to come to fruition. So thank you for what you do. And thanks for having us.
Thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did. Please make sure to give us a 5-star rating wherever you are listening and share with someone you know. See you next week.